It actually happened. A World Cup final completely decided by the referee. I'm kidding. It is sad to see, though, top referee Wayne Barnes heading into retirement because of threats against himself, his wife, and his kids. Referees being the centre of attention following a game of rugby at the moment is a huge issue plaguing the game. Even legendary referee Nigel Owens is slamming the state of the game at the moment, calling out World Rugby to take action. But the question becomes, what action can World Rugby realistically take, and who's at fault? Is it the refs? Is it the players, the TMOs, the coaches, the laws of the game, the passionate yet sometimes crazy fans? Look, reffing's a tough gig at the moment. You can't deny that. More action, more ball in play time, more decisions than ever before to be made. Add in the changing laws, directives, and differing interpretations, the way the game's moving is really leaving them wide open to criticism. But it's not like this is a new thing to rugby though. As long as I can remember, with close games, there's often referees copping the blame. Whether it's a penalty that should have been blown in the 68th minute or a missed forward pass in the second. They always tend to get a lot of airtime in rugby. Actually, referees in general do. They've got a big job that's always changing. While dealing with all the different moving parts of the game and the match itself, they've got 30 players screaming at them and 3 people in their ear. I think it's 3, maybe there's another, I'm not sure. But this leads me to one of rugby's greatest paradoxes at the moment. Do we slow the game down and get the decisions right? Or do we speed the game up, let it flow with more wrong calls? The introduction of the TMO was and still is one of the most divisive inclusions to the modern game. Look, it adds to the theatre, sometimes gets ridiculous, and often makes us question the technology and still seems to not always get the right decision. We find ourselves in this weird balancing act of power between the referee and the TMO, where we could stop the game for 5 minutes to get one decision right, and a bunch of other calls are missed throughout a game without any replays. Something as a fan base we can't deny is that as a whole, year on year, there has been an increasing number of correct decisions made on average. Which makes me wonder, does the small amount of bad calls in a game seem so much more significant because there's less dodgy calls altogether? Maybe. One suggestion I do have to improve the TMO process though is let that feedback echo through the entire stadium so it's very transparent what the decision was and why, not just for people at home but for people in attendance. The other elephant in the room is the entire red card / TMO debate. We could talk all day about this one, but I really believe international rugby needs to stick away from being sent off for the entire game. Not because of what happened to Sam Cane in that World Cup final, but the lack of buzz and atmosphere that it creates around a stadium and a game in general when one side's playing a man down. Usually this ends up one-sided. It wasn't in that World Cup final, but generally speaking, it does ruin the contest. I'm a massive fan of finding players. There's a reason why it's been a successful strategy in changing behaviours across so many different sports. And like my mate the Black Jersey said in his World Cup breakdown video, which was brilliant by the way, the whole red card / yellow card frenzy at the moment is really just poor discipline from players. I'm a Wallabies fan, and trust me, we've copped it the most in the last few years. And what constitutes dangerous play / foul play from World Rugby now is so clean cut. Still the narrative though keeps revolving around the referee and rarely the player. Which is starting to lead me on to what I really want to rant about. As a rugby community, we've become so bad at accepting the referee's decision. I'm not saying it's everyone, but it's definitely not a couple of people either. I'm guilty myself. I'm still trying to let go of Matthew Raynor blowing a penalty against Bernard Foley for time wasting over a year ago. It's hard to just accept a call and move on. With that said, I believe there's a much deeper culture in the game at the moment where it's become suitable to blame the referee. And I'll give you a couple of really good examples. There were many coaches that blamed the referee for the outcome of a game in the World Cup press conferences. Wales and Samoa are the first two that spring to mind, but also just in general, Michael Cheika, Rassie Erasmus spring straight to mind as repeat offenders. You have to think, what message is this sending to the fan bases? I know when Michael Cheika was coaching the Wallabies, I really disliked refereeing during that period of time. And then there's YouTube channels like TAS Analytics that has 34k subscribers, 23 million views, which is centered around throwing referees under the bus. Sure, it's been a successful strategy for captivating an audience, but the damage it causes to the game and feeding this negative culture is crazy. Anyone can pause footage of a rugby game and nitpick different decisions made. I'll never understand how that channel avoids copyright claims, and then people who are so good for the game of rugby like Squidge gets their World Cup breakdown copyright striked. I just can't decide if it's embarrassing or depressing. While it may only be a referee or two that are leaving the game at the moment, it'll get to a point where our top referees are nowhere near as good as they are now, which will actually make the problem worse. World Rugby definitely needs to step in more and support their referees. I think, definitely around the yellow card, red card business, maybe make those decisions not as impactful on the game, but more a punishment on the player. And be super transparent. Come out and admit when decisions were right or when there was one or two bad calls. So people aren't dependent on the comment section for that gratification. And for the rugby community, myself included, I think it's time we try to learn to accept the referee's decisions. Let's shine the spotlight on what's putting the referees in these situations, the players and the laws of the game. I must admit too, most New Zealand fans or friends of mine took that World Cup final like bloody champions. It's a pretty hot topic. Let me know your thoughts. We all have our opinions. Thanks for watching.